Hey everybody, welcome back. This is lesson 45, which is on what we are calling interval and set notation. So just some basic vocabulary. What we've been doing and what you have been getting as solutions to your inequalities are known as set notation. So when I write something like this, x is less than or equal to 9, that's set notation, or another term would be set builder notation. That means the same thing. So that's what we're going to start with. We can graph those, and then we can also express our answer in something called interval notation. I'm going to explain what that means with an example. So we're going to start with graphing this particular example. Always start with the number given in the middle, and then I always put 2 lines on each side, and then label the rest of the number line. I choose which type of circle it is. In this case, because it's greater than 9, it's going to be an open circle. And because my variable is first, I can draw the arrow in the direction that this arrow symbol is pointing, which is to the right. These numbers are greater than 9. So now interval notation basically sets up a boundary, and it explains where this graph starts and where it stops. So this graph starts at 9. Now this graph, because it continues on and on forever in this direction, it does not stop. So we're going to say that it goes until infinity, which is like a sideways 8. So if you want to draw an infinity symbol, you can always turn your paper and draw an 8 and then turn it back. And then depending on what kind of start and what kind of stop it has, we're going to use symbols, parentheses, and brackets. So interval notation is just another way to represent this information, and I typically find that it helps if you graph it first. So once I have the graph, I can see my graph starts at 9. It does not stop, right? It goes until infinity. I'm going to use parentheses when the set does not contain the number. So for example, if I'm using a greater than or a less than sign, and I only use parentheses when I'm using infinity, because really infinity is not a number, so my answer can't contain infinity because infinity is not a specific number. And then I'm going to use brackets when it does contain the number. So for example, if I'm using a greater than or equal to sign or a less than or equal to sign. And I can mix them up, right? So notice this one has a parentheses at the beginning and then a bracket at the end. This one has a bracket at the beginning and a parenthesis at the end. In my example, my first example here, 9 is not included in my solution, so it's going to get a parenthesis. And infinity will always get a parenthesis. So again, sometimes I'll have matching symbols, sometimes I'll have mismatching symbols. Copy these down, make sure you have them, and then we're going to do a few more examples together. Alright, so this time we're going to again start with a set notation and then graph it and then move to our interval notation. So I have -6 in the middle. Don't have my pen. Let's try that again. -6 in the middle. And if you recall negatives, we number them kind of backwards, so as you get larger, the negatives get smaller. Ooh, that's a 7, sorry. I don't know what happened to that one. And here I'm going to use a closed dot because my solution is equal to -6, but it's also less than. And because my variable is in the front, my less than arrow is pointing to the left, which goes this way. Again, it's the 2 numbers in my interval notation represent the starting and stopping points of my graph. So my graph starts over here, and because there's an arrow, it represents infinity, but because we're moving in this negative direction, I'm going to have to write negative infinity. And the end of my graph stops at -6. Again, if you look above, if my number is contained in the answer, so in this case like -6, I'm going to use a bracket. Always put commas in between the 2 numbers, and then infinity always gets a parenthesis. So just by looking at this, I can then graph from here. So my graph starts at negative infinity and it stops at negative 6, and negative 6 should have a closed dot. So this next example is a little trickier because I'm giving you the interval notation and we have to work kind of backwards. So I'm going to start with these two numbers on my graph somewhere. So I'm just going to kind of put negative 1 here, and I'm going to put like 4 here because the graph says it goes from negative 1 to negative 4. And because there are brackets, there are closed dots on each of these. And so the graph starts at negative 1 and stops at positive 4. That's an interesting graph, and since we haven't seen this before, I'm going to show you what this would look like in set notation. So basically what it's saying is the answers are in between negative 1 and 4. So watch this. I'm still going to have negative 1 and 4, and I'm going to use my less than or equal to symbols to show that my variable is somewhere, my solution is somewhere in between negative 1 and positive 4. There you go. Be sure you copy everything down as we go. This next example has my graph, and I'm going to now, you tell me which, decide which way you want to go first. Maybe you want to start with interval, maybe you want to start with the set builder notation. It's up to you. They're going to have the same pieces in them. They're going to start, this one's going to start at 3 and end at 6. This one's going to start at 3 and end at 6. And then depending on the circles we choose is going to depend on which symbol I'm going to use. Am I going to use a parenthesis? Am I going to use a bracket? Bracket is used if my answer contains that solution, and a parenthesis is if it does not. Same thing here. I'm going to have a less than or equal to sign because it's equal to, but here, because it's an open circle, I can only have a less than sign. And this last one, this one starts at negative 6 and all the answers look greater than it. So negative 6 is my key number. Notice only one number here, greater than or equal because of the closed dot to negative 6. And then over here, it starts at negative 6. It goes all the way to positive infinity. Even though I know you see negatives right here, eventually it will get to positive infinity. 6 is a closed dot, so it has a bracket, and parentheses always get a parenthesis. Alright, and that's it. So when you come into class, we're going to do some more practice with these. Looking forward to seeing you guys soon.